Hello, Camp Pros. This is Oliver Gregan, Summer and Family Camps Director at YMCA Camp Jewel.
And I'm Matt Hansberger, and I'm the Camp Director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility, and you are listening to First Class Counselors, a special series of the CampHacker podcast.
This series is for the camp directors to give to their counselors as they hire and prepare them for the upcoming summer.
That's right, because you are a great camp director, and you know that your camp counselors and your frontline staff are the important ones here. They are the key to camper retention because they see campers every day. So we hope that we can give this practical advice so that your counselors are the best ever this summer.
So in each episode, we will meet with some all-star camp staff to give your counselors the tools to make this summer the best one yet. And I'm super excited about this episode because we are inviting a really good friend of mine, the lovely Miss Phoebe Jones. Phoebe, can you introduce yourself and a little bit about you?
Yeah, although I'm not sure I can do a better introduction than you've just done for me. So my name is Phoebe Jones. I've worked with a couple of camps across Canada in the last 10 years. I currently work as the Assistant Director of Staff at Camp 10 Oaks, which is a camp that serves the LGBTQ community. All of our campers are from the community, whether they identify as somewhere on the LGBTQ 2S+ umbrella, or whether they have family members that identify that way.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. And it actually really buys into what we're talking about today because today's topic is Campships. So we want to be talking about camp relationships, and we want our counselors some of the practical advice on how to manage those relationships. So how staff are being intentional to make sure camp is the best for those campers who are at a time where the relationships they're having may be a little bit confusing or the opportunity is there. So we want to talk about that. Relationships at camp are a thing. Campers are at a point where they're curious about each other. Staff are tan, fit, and serving the same purpose. So they see eye to eye on a really important value. It's the perfect cocktail to kind of make relationships happen. And juicy relationships, our word of the day, kind of awkwardly, are the relationships at camp. These aren't the only ones. So we also have many different types of relationships, such as staff-to-staff friendships, staff-to-staff relationships, camper-to-camper friendships, camper-to-camper relationships, and staff-to-campers, which should be some type of a mentorship. So, I mean, Matt kind of has some really good advice on this right off the bat. Matt, what do you want to make sure people know right off?
Yes. Okay. For all of you listening out there, no matter what we say today, follow your policy. Okay. Follow your staff policy when it comes to staff relationships and camper friendships and relationships and all that amount. We're going to give you some different ones that we've experienced and some different advice based on those things. But we are not the people that want to get you fired from your job because you signed your contract, and that means you signed that you would serve those policies. If you have a personal opinion about that policy and you think it should change, that's okay, but that's what you should talk to your direct supervisor one-on-one about. This isn't what to be complaining in the staff lounge that you don't think it's fair or no, anything like that, because you've signed up for it. If you want to see that change happen, stick around for another summer or talk to your supervisor and see what the intention was, because there might be some room to change, but there might also be some intention behind that policy that you don't know. But whatever you do, even if you're inspired like crazy by this episode, which we hope you are, follow your policy.
So while you're following that policy, the episode today is going to provide you with a lot of tools to make sure that you can navigate the policies that are given to you in a proper way and to the best of your ability. So today we're covering romantic relationships, non-romantic relationships, and if you stick with us to the end, we'll talk a little bit about our camp relationship stories. So first, let's get right off the bat. We obviously are stating that's really important. Your camp is going to have policies on romantic relationships, whether it's staff to staff or camper to camper. So let's kick it off. What are some of the policies that camps that we've worked with have? So Phoebe, do you want to kind of kick us off and let us know what are some policies that you've worked with?
Yeah, absolutely, Oliver. So a couple of different places have had different policies, but generally speaking, the policy across the board has been that your relationship is private and that all of the role modeling that happens around it is appropriate. It's really important for us as leaders at camp to make sure that we're role modeling for our campers what appropriate relationships look like, sound like, and can be recognized like. And that's important whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship. It's really important as well that we're role modeling that those relationships are camp focused and are holding each other up and supporting each other. Camp is such a great place because it can be an awesome opportunity for people to explore friendships and relationships and like healthy supports with peers and things like that. And but I've never worked at a camp that has explicitly encouraged any sort of camp relationship.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really kind of the general camp thing that we've been seeing, or at least a lot of us have worked with, is that separation of relationship from camp. Matt, you want to talk a little bit more about some of your experience with policies and camp relationships?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. I love what Phoebe said about being good role models for kids, because they're looking up, like you as a counselor or a young staff are the closest in age, but also in that leadership role. So you're the role model almost implicitly. What I would say from a director's perspective is, if you're choosing to be in a relationship at camp, in romantic or non-romantic, those relationships shouldn't interfere with the job that you have to do, and shouldn't take away from the fact that your number one job is to keep the campers safe and to be kid focused. The moment a relationship takes you away from that focus of kids, is you not doing your job and taking care of them. So relationships should never go above the care that you give to campers. The other thing that I would say about relationships for the romantic side of them is that you're not as sneaky as you think you are. People know the camp bubble is small, and people talk and those kinds of things, and people are going to find out, and it's going to be weird socially, and you're going to have to navigate it, and your director is going to find out eventually too. What they choose to do with it is up to them, but know that you're putting yourself on display. Even if you think you're sneaky, people are going to find out. But even if people do find out, the best thing you can do is not let it interfere with your job, and be that role model of a healthy and positive relationship.
Yeah, I like that it's not interfering. Something that is really cool is we don't want to interfere with that camper's experience. And a lot of us think that staff relationship first. Something that I really encourage is, you're going to have campers who are interested in relationships too. And you got to think about your policy when it comes to that as well. Because you don't want relationships to interfere with what your camper experience is. So if you have a camp that, the camp dance is a really big deal, and maybe, asking someone to the dance is a huge part of your culture, you also have to think about, what you're presenting at your camp, and what your campers' feelings are going to be like if they go and ask another camper out to the dance and they say no. That is a huge part of your culture that you might have to identify and work with. So as well as that staff to staff not affecting the campers' time at camp, you also need to focus on making sure that your culture is not creating a way for campers to have a ruined time at camp because of an experience that they've had that was negative, because you promoted them to, that they have to have a dance partner at the dance, or they have to have a boyfriend or girlfriend at summer camp. So think about that camper to camper policy as well, and a little bit about how their experience is affected by it. I think is really important. So what is your culture promoting? And that's kind of like my 2 cents on it. But kind of moving a bit down, what advice do you give to counselors who have to answer questions about their relationships? So we all know about it. Campers want to talk to their counselors and know who's dating too, especially those teen campers. So how do you navigate those questions from campers? And Phoebe, you want to kick us off again?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'd say be honest, but establish also really clear boundaries about what you're able and willing to share. I found in my experience that kids are receptive to hearing, like, I'm not comfortable sharing that information with you, or I'm not allowed to share, or I'm not able to share that information with you. But there's room for honesty there, and I think that can be really important. I would say on the other end of the spectrum, that extreme exaggeration can also be really funny. My partner, while we were most recently working at camp, told his campers that he couldn't disclose the relationship of his partner because she was very famous, and he wasn't allowed to tell anyone. They wanted to know if they knew me, and he said, "Oh yes, you definitely know who she is," and that was a really intriguing and dramatic thing for them, even though they left at the end of the week having no idea that we were in a relationship.
Oh man, I know who your partner is, and I love them so much more for knowing that. It it makes it perfect. Matt, what about you? What is your advice for the prying camper question?
Yeah, oh man, that's so brilliant. I think I want to do that. I'm going to do that this summer. But I think being honest and redirecting. My partner, I am blessed with a workspace that allows my partner to come to camp. She was a former amazing camp staff member, and so she comes for dinner every once in a while because we live pretty close. And when kids kind of give me that, ooh, Iskis, you and Bea, you're dating, I try to redirect the conversation. Like I instantly start talking about what I like about her in terms of those great positive qualities. Her as an amazing person because she builds connections with people, or that she's such a great friend, or she's so kind to me, and that's what I like about her. So you're being honest, and you're giving them that kind of personal insight that they feel they know, but you're also showing them that a relationship is more than the romantic part, that it's about the friendship, and that you're dating your best friend or whatever, that kind of thing. So choose to be as honest as you want. Obviously not getting too personal about your intimate details, obviously, but the friendship and the great qualities of that person, I think, is again a great role modeling tool.
I could not agree more, Matt. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, you actually kind of hit on the point that I definitely want to hit. All three of us are going to say honesty is a huge thing to be with the kids. And whether the honest within your policy, obviously, going back to that point, is really important. But I like to say honesty without detail is really important. So you don't need to talk about the date that you went with your partner with campers. You don't need to talk about any specific actions that you take with your partner, or how to do said actions. I have the wonderful horror story of knowing about a counselor who wanted to teach campers about sex at camp and had conversations with them in detail about how to properly do things,
Oh my God.
which is highly inappropriate. Yeah.
Oh God, that's awful. Yikes.
And granted, we had that conversation with that counselor about how that's inappropriate, but sometimes it's really easy to lean into those questions where campers are prying and trying to learn something, especially when they're curious. And you want to be the cool counselor. You want to say yes, and you want to answer them. But having the strength to say, hey, look, I'm not going to talk about that with you, is the showing of a really strong counselor. And I find that the counselors who are willing to say that to their campers and say, look, we're having a really great conversation about the importance of relationships and having a healthy one, but that's information I'm not going to talk to you about. Those counselors are typically more respected by their campers, and they're the hero counselors. They're the ones who are like, kids know that's a great counselor because they're holding strong to the values that they know they need to follow. So with that, be honest without getting into detail. Specifics about things are typically going to be what get you in trouble. So stay away from those specifics. Now let's kind of get into it. Let's say there is a camper relationship on camp. It may be your camper who has a relationship with another camper in another cabin, whatever might be going on. But how do you address when two campers officially say they're dating at camp? They're a camp couple. And let me see, Matt, let's see. Can you kick this one off for us?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's interesting because I think like the knee-jerk reaction is to be like, split them up and never let them see each other. But I think that we have to like recognize that we set the perfect conditions for people to make those close connections at camp. That's what we try and do. And it's not I think it's unfair to say like, oh, well, you really got into this like team building and relationship building that we do at camp, and now we're going to like punish you for that. I'm not saying that you should like encourage it at all, but I think being aware that there is that relationship and help them focus on building friends with everybody and not focus on that relationship. In the same way that with staff, we say, don't let it interfere with your job. I think with campers, we can say, if you're feeling this way, that's fine, but we don't want to make this a spectacle, or it's not the best way to say it, but we want to focus on building friendships equally with everybody. But I do think, that being said, it's important that you because you're aware of that, don't set them up for any opportunities to go farther than a parent would be comfortable hearing about. A parent will be fine hearing that Sally had a crush on Susie, but the parent is not going to be fine hearing that we let Susie and Sally make out because we weren't supervising them. And I think Phoebe's going to talk about that a bit later, so I don't want to step on that. But I think be aware that like we set the perfect conditions for relationships, so we need to be prepared to manage it and redirect to those friendship and quality conversations rather than the making it a big stigma.
Phoebe, do you want to branch off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends a lot on what stage of the relationship they're in. You're going to have campers that arrive and they're already in relationships. And when that's the case, we need to talk about like what are the boundaries that camp sets around the way that you're allowed to express your relationship when you're at camp. Maybe you have leadership participants who like already have a relationship, now they're attending camp and they're allowed to kiss when they're at home, and that's fine. But now you're at camp and the standards are different, and so we need to be honest with one another about where those lines are so that we're not setting you up for failure, and we're giving you the best possible situation in which you can continue to be in your relationship throughout the duration of camp. For campers that are starting relationships with it while they're at camp, which as we all know is all too common, it's a similar conversation about establishing boundaries, like what behavior is and isn't appropriate at camp. And I like to think about it in terms of like what behavior in terms of a camp setting would I like to see between any campers around camp. If I'm seeing kind of exclusivity from a pair of kids, regardless of whether that's a relationship or not, and they're excluding other folks, and that's not going to be like a positive addition to camp. And likewise, if you have two campers that are in a relationship, but they're actually like inviting other people to be a part of that closeness that they have, and they're sharing their friendship and really making that like a positive contribution to camp, then that can be more positive than like Matt was saying, splitting those campers apart.
Yeah, I like to really focus on the age dependency. If you're working with younger campers who maybe don't know like the full realm of what a relationship is, it's very different than if you're working with teenagers. And you do have to kind of respect that difference. With younger campers, I'm going to focus maybe on what does a relationship mean? How do you show your appreciation to someone that you really care about? And you can have a little bit of a lighter conversation with that, but also making sure the kids learn about that respect that they have to have for that person that they might be trying to become a partner with. Whereas with the older campers, I would definitely take it in a realm of a leadership opportunity and say, hey, look, you've come to camp and you're in a relationship, or you've come to camp and you found someone that's really important to you. You're also one of our older campers, whether you're in a leadership position or not, you're now representing yourself to younger kids on what they expect a relationship to be. And I love putting that on our older campers is you're always a role model. Even if you're 14 and you're not in a leadership village or unit yet, there's still younger kids who are looking up to you. And another thing that I always find we lose focus on in teaching this is crowd control, which is a weird thing, but it's not always the two that are in the relationship that are causing the conflict in the cabin. Sometimes it's the friends in the group around them who want to express the drama, who want to get it kicked up. And it's really important to talk to them about how invested they are in somebody else's relationship and how important they're finding it that, Sally and Susie are a couple. Where they're a couple, they're not a throuple, you're not part of it, so why do you have to care so much about what's going on? I think it's really important to kind of have those conversations with others about letting people kind of do their own thing and not putting that social pressure on them, where Sally and Susie have enough problems in being a couple already, because they are a couple, and, they're at camp and they have their counselor coming down hard on them to make sure that they're keeping their personal space bubbles. So they don't need their best friend Tammy telling them that Susie should really be dating Kendall. I don't know. I just got into the whole teenage girl drama and I don't know what to do about it.
I hope for those of you who just listened to the podcast, I hope that you get the video on this too, because Oliver had like the sassy head shake going back and forth too. It is worth tuning into the video just for that aspect on its own. Oliver, you're my favorite.
I know. Oh God. So yeah, I think age dependency, crowd control, keep your eye on them, and try to not be sassy, when you do it.
Keep the sassy shoulders to a minimum there.
So let's say all of your efforts have failed and the sassiness is out and your campers have crossed the line in behavior. What do you do to address this? And our question right now is kind of phrased towards directors, but what do you do with the campers? How should a counselor handle this? Do you call the parents? Do you contact them? Do you let them know what's going on? There's a lot of maybe personal or camp policy opinions in this, so we don't want to go too much into depth, but what's your advice kind of in this situation? So Phoebe, can you take us away?
Yeah, so I think, you've hit on the key point here, Oliver, which is this is a really difficult conversation to have. And if you're a counselor and you recognize that your campers have crossed the line, then you need to pull in support. You need to get a director, you need to get a senior staff member so that you're not going in on this conversation alone. But we need to find out, not only what boundaries have been crossed, but why were they crossed? Was it that we didn't clearly explain what the boundaries were for kids at camp? And we need to reaffirm that camp is not the best place, to explore romantic relationships in any sort of a sexual way, whether that's kissing or something else. And I think that it's really important to say that that we aren't able to support kids in all of the ways that they might need while they're developing those skills and in relationship building. And therefore, camp can't be the place that we help those kids establish those types of boundaries, and we need to be firm on our policies there. I have had this situation occur, I'll say, and the bottom line question is, where were the counselors? Why is it that campers were allowed to be unsupervised for such an extended period of time that they were allowed to cross the boundaries that the camp had established in terms of behavior? And I think that's one of the things you're going to start looking at when you're evaluating a situation like that is, what did we fail to put in place, to support our campers to make sure that they were always supervised? Why did we not know that they were missing and they were allowed to sneak off into the woods? But I want to say that it's not the goal to shame kids for their behavior. And we also need to recognize that sometimes campers who come to camp feel that this is the safest and the most supportive environment that they have to explore those things. And while we're not, as an organization, we don't feel able to support them, they might feel like we are the people that they want in their corner as they're taking these next steps in terms of building relationships. So it can be challenging to navigate, but I think if you're a counselor and you're listening to this podcast, then the answer is you need to get support from other people who can back you up on having a conversation about what has happened and what happens next.
Yeah, I think it's really going to be the director's decision on where you're going to go with it. And supervision is going to be the really thing that falls on that counselor. So as a director, we're probably going to report it to the parents. We're gonna let parents know that something happened on camp, because there's nothing worse than a parent driving down the road and asking, "Hey, what happened?" And Susie says, "Well, I made out with Sally, and the counselor said I wasn't in trouble." So with that being said, you kind of do want to tell your parents, if you're a director listening to this, usually you want to be on the safe and sorry. Report, let the parent know. Some parents will take it differently, so that's really important. Counselors, addressing you guys, it's supervision. So yeah, your director is going to come and talk to you, and one of the first things that a director is probably going to be asking you is, what happened with the supervision? And a good counselor is going to be the one who says, hey, look, this is where I messed up. This is where the issue was. And it might be a case of you have to take the blame here. You just weren't paying attention when you were supposed to. You were focused on something else. There maybe wasn't enough supervision. You were on solo, which means your co was off. And you're just sitting there alone watching all the kids in your cabin, and it was just too much, and two got away. But that's the question that's going to come to you is, where was supervision at this time? And a great counselor just needs to know I need to be aware and I need to know what my campers are up to. So, if you are on that solo coverage, maybe your answer to your director is, I'm going to need to start doing more camper counts, more face checks, all those kind of things that are going to really help keep me supervising my campers at all times. Matt, what do you got for us?
I just wanted to throw a quick point in here and just say that you might not like find two campers like making out in the woods. A camper might come up to you and say like, hey, can I tell you something? And they might want to like talk to you about this because again, you're their role model, or maybe they know that you are in a healthy relationship and they're interested in that. And I think while we want to honor that they're coming to us, I think that this is kind of out of the, stick with me here, but it's kind of out of the child abuse manual and how we respond to that. Because if a camper discloses something, they're like, hey, can I tell you this? And it's a secret. Like, I don't want you to tell anyone, but it's a secret. I think you got to be aware of what like can of worms you're opening yourself up to by promising a secret. Like, I think in general, never promise to keep anything a secret that a camper tells you, just because you don't know where that conversation is going to go. And the point that we teach our staff with child abuse, and I think it applies to this too, is saying like, I care about you and I'm honored that you want to talk to me in whatever kid-friendly way you want to say that. But I can't promise that I can keep this a secret, but I'll only tell someone that would actually need to know. I promise that I wouldn't hurt your trust in that way, but I can only tell, or I would only tell people that would absolutely need to know. Just a quick point there.
No, that's a fantastic point. And I have a great story of a camper coming up and telling me that two of the other campers were going to make out behind our mini farm. And me as a counselor made sure I had coverage on the rest of my campers, ran full speed, got to the back of the mini farm before them and was sitting there like waiting, all cool like, and the two around the back of the mini farm, and they saw me sitting there and like, what are you doing here, Oliver? And I'm just like, just chilling with our 600-pound pig Stanley. What are you here without a counselor? And then they're like, oh, and then all three walked back to where they were supposed to be, which was hilarious. And I was out of breath.
You are. They would have.
I know I was the worst. But you know what? I was properly supervising my campers. I'll hold to it.
Did you give them the shoulders? Like, I'm just hanging with Stanley. What are you guys doing? You want to hang out with Stanley with me?
I did a classic leaning against the wall with one foot up against it.
Oh, so classic. Excellent.
Oliver, you're so cool. Oh,
the coolest.
Man.
Back in the day. So sometimes these relationships do get a bit more complicated, but they also are really simple in a way. But that comes from sometimes campers are discovering that they might be a part of LGBTQ community while they're at camp, or they might have known before and they open up at camp and they're more willing to share. So what are some ways that your camp has found ways to navigate these situations, or that you found to navigate them? So I'm going to save Phoebe for a second because she's fantastic at this topic. And I'm going to let Matt kind of lead us off and get us going.
Just give me I'll set the bar super low and then Phoebe can just knock it out of the park. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm just
giving me way too much credit over here.
No. I'm excited for Phoebe too. So I'll keep it brief as I can keep it. Like I would just say, like we can take that question and in my mind, you can kind of just like scratch LGBTQ. I think there's some things we need to consider, but I think as soon as we hear about like a camper who is trans or a camper who is gay, we can really freak out about like, these logistics, we need to figure out this way. Where are they going to sleep? What are they going to do? What are they, if they get into a relationship? Like take a step back and really think about how big of a deal that kind of thing is. You can really treat those situations in the same way that you would treat a lot of them, or it doesn't take as much thought. And kids are more resilient and they know themselves better than you know them. Like follow your policies, but you can also just ask them or ask parents of those campers. So in whether it's a relationship or whether it's like where are they going to sleep issue, those kinds of things, I think your safest bet is to stop assuming things and let them tell their story to you. Because Phoebe mentioned this in our pre-talk. She's like, there's tons of campers that come to camp. And I was like, oh yeah, there's tons of campers that come to camp who haven't identified and aren't out and aren't open with that with people that you've probably already had sleeping in the same cabin as the same gender or the same sex. And you just completely missed it and everything was fine. So everything will probably be fine. And I just think don't make such a big deal of it and ask them if, and they're likely, more likely than not, comfortable talking about that, or their parents will be comfortable talking about that. I've never gone wrong with that method, but Phoebe, I'm excited for what you want to shed light on this topic.
Yeah, Matt, I mean, you've said some really good points already. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that I work for Camp 10 Oaks, which caters to youth from the LGBTQ identities, families, and communities. So this is something that we see at our camp on a regular basis. And we need to recognize that however you divide up cabins, there's always the possibility that romantic relationships are taking place. Always, always. At 10 Oaks, we don't have gendered cabins. And so, we are dealing with, some of the things that other camps are just trying to wrap their heads around in regards to relationships in cabins. I'm going to use queer as an umbrella term here to refer to all folks, all of our campers who are from the LGBTQ community. As Matt mentioned, we know that queer campers are at our camps, and they always have been, whether you've known it or not. And so while you haven't encountered necessarily this particular scenario yet, it's likely that at some point you're going to. So set yourself up for success. If you don't want relationships at camp, then make sure that you hold that same standard across all ages and across all genders. And if you wouldn't want a boy and a girl to walk around camp holding hands, then make sure that you model that with your staff, regardless of their gender. So don't send, girls walking around camp holding hands, massaging one another, any of those things that you don't want to see happen in terms of a relationship at camp. Don't allow them to be modeled, and hold just campers to that standard as well. Help them understand that we're creating a place where everyone is welcome and people aren't left out. And then recognize also, as I've said before, that camp feels like a really safe place for some campers. And they may not be safe in their schools and in their homes. And that means that we might see these types of relationships forming in a way that is different than what they might be able to express at home or at school. And also recognize that camp can be a really unsafe place for other campers, especially our queer and our trans campers, where they might be away from their supports and their advocates in terms of their parents and and their teachers and their friends and all of those folks that they really lean on for support. And I would empower you as a counselor, as a staff member working at camp, to take this as an opportunity to really make sure that you evaluate the way that you use language, and that it is always appropriate and inclusive. So one thing that I like to empower staff that I work with to do is to make sure that they're using gender neutral language whenever they refer to groups of campers or individual campers. And that means when you're talking about relationships, setting the standard in such a way that you're not talking about just boys and girls and what they're allowed to do with one another.
Yeah. Okay. Everything Phoebe just said, I'm like absorbing, but it, and I'm definitely going to just listen to it over and over again. I think all of her points are fantastic. And I love how specific, and you as someone listening should probably go back and listen to it, but I love how specific she is with her language and how she goes through it. Because a lot of the time, the way you talk about this is very delicate, and Phoebe does a fantastic job. I just tip my hat to her about getting through it, especially on something where you're talking to a greater mass. For me, I find it extremely complicated, but also really simple. The complicated part is also not really in your hands as a counselor. If you're a counselor and someone's coming to your cabin and your director lets you know, like, hey, this young gentleman who's going to be in your cabin was born a female, it's not you to really go, well, then why are they in my male cabin? They're giving you that camper, and they're probably knowing that you're a decent enough counselor that you're going to be able to handle maybe some of the rocky road that might be in front of you with that camper's experience at camp. Because, there might be the cabin that has the one kid who doesn't agree with that child being there. So yeah, really complicated, but also really simple, because your job is not to make that decision about where that camper is placed. your job is to make sure that camper feels as comfortable as possible within that cabin. And that's what your camp is kind of expecting from you as a counselor. So the big part for you is talk to your camper. Take that camper and with a little bit of time and listen to them. Listen to what kind of pronouns they want to be called. Listen to the things that they are looking for in their camp experience, so you can make them feel as comfortable as possible. Now I'm gonna go back to Phoebe because I think she wants to say more.
Yeah, I think just to close off this topic before we move on, I think it's important as a counselor to make sure that you're holding, we talked about standards in terms of behavior, but I think I want to extend that also to making sure that your cabin is a welcoming place. So, we don't talk really about people's genders, especially not as it relates to their genitalia. We don't talk about people's bodies, their bodies are their own. We don't talk about, people's, we're not making camp ever an unsafe place for people to be, regardless of, the color of their skin or their religion, their gender, their pronouns, any of those factors. And I would empower you as a counselor, if that's something that you feel like you need more information on, then you should do some research. If you find that you have campers coming in and you don't know the best way to support them, reach out, do a Google search. There's lots of information out there, and you can learn even a few things that are going to make that experience for that camper a whole lot safer and a whole lot more enjoyable while you have them in your care.
Yeah. Matt, what do you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Phoebe, I think a lot of what you're saying is super smart, and not that I don't want to put you on the pedestal as the expert on this topic, but I think you've got a lot of really smart things to say, and we'll do this at the end. But Phoebe, if people want to get in touch with you, if they just have a quick question and they appreciate the things you said, what's an email or a way that somebody can get in touch just to ask a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely. My email is phoebekjones@gmail.com. Pretty straightforward there. So if you can spell my name right, PHOEBEKJONES@gmail.com, then you can reach out and I'd be happy to help direct you to some folks who have even better knowledge than I do. Because as you said, I'm not the expert on any of these things. I'm just doing my best to learn and be a little bit better every day.
That's awesome. Thanks, Phoebe.
All right. Cool. So I would love to obviously talk about that topic until day's end, but let's go to our next question. So we're going to go back to a little bit about staff relationships and a little bit of what happens on offsite activities. A lot of camps will have, your staff goes on their time off, they come back, and sometimes a little bit of drama comes back from whatever occurred during that time, whatever it might be. So going into it, how do you make sure that this drama doesn't come back to camp? So Phoebe, do you have something that you've seen in the past that really works to keep camp focused on camp?
Yeah, I had actually a really brilliant supervisor at one point who, for legal reasons, asked all of the folks in relationships to disclose it to her. And she never shared that information. She never pried. She never put forward a definition of what a relationship needed to be before it needed to be disclosed. She kind of put that on the staff members. And but just by asking for that information, she was better able to support people at camp. And it also gave people a level of accountability for their actions at camp, because they knew that people were watching them, and it was on them now to prove, that they were able to be camper focused and to keep their attention on the campers and on the job that needed to be done. It also meant that in time off, when things happened, you had a support network available. And obviously, the hope is that your life outside of camp doesn't affect the job that you do, but I think we all know that sometimes that's not possible. And it's just important to set yourself up for success. If you're going to have conflict outside of camp to do with your relationship, whether it's a friendship gone awry or a romantic relationship that's experienced conflict over the break, make sure that you have a way to get support at camp that doesn't take away from kids. If you know that you have a place where you can talk maybe on your hour off, you can, go with a friend and talk through everything that's happening, or you can get support from your director, from your supervisor. Then that also gives you an outlet, a way to compartmentalize, so that while you're with the kids, you can be 100% focused, knowing that you have support that you can access outside of the moment when you're directly interacting with campers.
Yeah, Phoebe, you definitely opened up something that I felt like I made a mistake. My first time being a person who was deciding time off, I didn't want to know what the relationships were for my staff. And I said, don't tell me, because if I find out, then there's too much drama, and try and keep it quiet. And I quickly learned from my mistake, and I did what your brilliant supervisor did. And I actually I told my staff, if you're in a relationship, privately disclose it to me. And I'm going to make sure that you and your partner can have the time off together that you want. And then you won't get mad at me because I'm never putting you two together. Great tip for the directors who are listening to this. As much as sometimes, like Matt was saying before, if two people are dating, will separate them. Don't separate them for their time off. Let them do what they want to do during their time off. Try and give it to them together. So yeah, Phoebe's brilliant supervisor, smart, genius, a great tool for any camp director out there. And that kind of goes to the staff part for me. Is counselors, make sure that your time off is where you're spending your time wisely. I like to educate my staff about that beforehand. Go into your time off knowing that you're going to do something productive with your time. A lot of staff want to do maybe unproductive things, so like going out, having drinks, staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then coming back for the camp day to start at 8 a.m. with new campers arriving because it was holdover or change or whatever you might call it. And that's setting yourself up for success, and that's really just allowing the drama into camp. If you're going out for a nice dinner with your friends just to relax for the night, that's usually a little bit more helpful in keeping that drama back. And it's also way better getting you to do your job. Matt, what about you?
I think what you both said is great, and I love that shout out to directors to like not try to overmanage staff relationships in both ways. I think I just think I would throw it back to the idea of, if you are a counselor listening to this, obviously you're not going to ask, first of all, just because it popped into my head, obviously you're not going to ask campers to disclose their relationships to you. That is not your job. Do not do that. But second, just remember to keep it counselor, or just keep it camper focused in everything that you do when it comes to drama, whether it's relationship drama or friendship drama or anything that's going on outside of camp. Just remember that you have a huge effect on the camp community, and what you say can really set the climate. We talk a lot at camp about being a thermostat versus a thermometer, and how thermometers measure the temperature and thermostats set the temperature. And that when you're a member of a community like camp, you set the temperature, and then everyone else has to exist in that temperature that you set. So be aware of not turning down that temperature and letting your drama interfere with other people building relationships, or becoming a center shot in that way, because I think it's just that's toxic for a community, and that's that is not a great way to get hired back the next year.
Yeah, I definitely think as a camp director, one of my pet peeves is just learning about that counselor who stirs the pot and kind of makes drama. They're typically one of the last people that I would be looking at wanting to hire, just because I don't want drama at camp. I want us to be focused on the kids and having a great time. So the next kind of topic we're going to move into is, what are ways that you can build healthy, non-romantic relationships staff to staff? So what are the friendship building ways for staff at camp? Instead of just thinking everyone at camp is going to be romantically involved with each other, how do you kind of make sure that staff just become friends with each other and it doesn't have to go any farther? Phoebe, can you lead us off?
For sure. One of the things that I think about is how hard the transition is between being a leadership participant and being a staff member. It can be so hard to transition from being in a position where people are always like worried about you and caring about you and looking after you, to all of a sudden being the person who worries about and cares and looks after other people. And part of what is so hard in that transition is that for a long time, if you've been at camp for a long time, people have been helping you facilitate growing friendships, with other campers. And now all of a sudden that that role is gone a little bit, and you have to take a bit more of that weight onto your own shoulders in terms of making sure that you are creating relationships at camp. And so if you are someone who is already working at camp and you're going into your second season or third season or anything after that, do your best to welcome those people who are coming into the camp community as staff members for the first time, and really set the tone in terms of what sorts of things we do as a team to support one another, and to have fun. And I think that one of the things that I so enjoyed about growing up and working at the camp where I grew up is that there were events that happened that had nothing to do with campers, and they happened on like staff nights out. You know, the campers had gone to bed. We had a policy where one staff member stayed in the cabin and one staff member could go out, and you know, there were things that were tradition. We always did a pudding drop the night after pudding, where someone would stand on a chair and you try to drop pudding into the other person's mouth, which obviously is a mess. You know, but those sorts of traditions really help build relationships with staff members. And I would also say acting as a support, you know, we know because we work in camping that it's exhausting to be on 24/7. It's really, really hard. And so if you can identify ways to support other staff members, then you're going to make yourself a really, you know, valuable friend to have, and people are going to want to repay that to you. And that can be such a valuable way of showing friendship at camp, is being able to support other people when they need, you know, their cabin watched for 10 minutes while they, you know, are able to run to the washroom, or, you know, maybe they just need a breather and you could offer that support to them. And, you know, some of my best friends in the entire world came from camp, and it was like the love and support that they showed to me, in addition to the fun times that we had, that really solidified those friendships.
Okay. Yeah. It's so important, and there's so many different ways, and we've, like you said, grown with friendship at camp. We can replicate that as staff. Matt, what about you? I know you have a really cool specific thing you want to bring up.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the segue there is Phoebe was saying how we can like help others in those small moments. And I think that serving others mentality is really important. Like, how can we just help other people and extend our circle of focus, which sounds kind of contradictory because like all day you're focusing on the campers' needs. But if you want to build those great friendships, think about how you can serve other people. And a cool way that I was shown about this is to think about love languages. If you're not, I believe his name's Gary Forrester. I could be totally getting that one wrong. Oliver, do you know?
Gary Chapman. Yeah, Gary Chapman.
Thank you. Well, that is what it is. Gary Chapman has these things called the love languages, and they're the 5 love languages that are ways that you appreciate getting love, but they're also ways that you appreciate showing love as well. So in the show notes of this episode, I'm going to put up a quick love languages quiz that we've used at camp in the past to help you find out what your love language is, because when I took this quiz, it really kind of changed the way that I looked at how other staff were treating each other, and the ways that they were serving each other, because one of the love languages is physical touch. So they give and receive love, like high fives, hugs. Those are really important to those people. And it reminded me to help teach our staff that not everyone's love language is the same as your love language. So just because you're a big hugger and that's how you show appreciation, you giving a hug to somebody isn't as effective as you doing something for them. Acts of service is another love language. So that, like, you know, helping, like asking if you can watch their campers while they go get a drink of water. That's an act of service. Or words of encouragement, that they're better off getting those things. Then that's more effective than you giving them a hug. And I think giving someone a hug is a great segue to what you were going to talk about, Oliver.
Yeah, so I have really loved in the last, I mean, it's probably been going forever, but I really loved, I think, a focus on it that I've noticed in the last years about consent at camp, and just training your staff on consent, and really just asking for permission before moving forward to things that would invade somebody else's personal space. Kind of asking yourself, would I feel comfortable if this would happen to me? I don't know, so maybe I should ask before I do. And there are other camp professionals who 100% know so much about consent and can really cover it and run whole trainings on it. I know that I always try to make sure staff training has a lesson in consent, because a lot of people in the past I feel I've always looked at consent as a sexual thing, and is most definitely not just in that sexual realm. It's that comfort. It's making sure people are okay with things, and there's nothing wrong with asking for permission. So yeah, consent is a huge one. And going back to those skills and having something you can actually use, I actually took the 5 languages of love, added in the consent to our training, and what we did was all of our staff got little name tag tree cookies. So it had their name on it, and then on it we put the little symbols that they have for the 5 languages, and we just put those on their name tag so that when somebody came up to them, they could look at their name tag, know their name, but also know how to show them a little bit of appreciation right off the bat. So, they could walk up to Matt and say like, oh, Matt really likes physical touch. That's how he sees appreciation. So I can, put my hand on his shoulder or pat him on the back, and he's going to be more likely okay with that. And I kind of got permission because he's wearing his name tag that says, hey, physical touch. I'm cool with that. But also the other ones are words of appreciation or gifts. So you can see that and kind of react to them, how they're kind of giving that permission. The other one, the one that I also thought of and want to communicate about is that we're looking at building non-romantic healthy relationships staff to staff. And a lot of returning staff miss the opportunity to make new friends with new staff members that come to camp. Some camps have like a 97% retention rate with their staff, but a lot of staffs will see about 40 to 50% new staff every summer. And that means that about 50% of your staff are brand new to camp, and they need someone who's going to show them the ropes, but also take them into town to pick up something from Walmart or like the local convenience store. They're going to need someone who's going to show them a restaurant that they can go and eat at. That's really important so that they feel welcomed, but also so you can start building that relationship. So if you have a car on camp and you're one of those people who's been to camp before, take the new staff on time off so they can go and relax at a dinner with you, and you can have a frank conversation about camp with them so they can feel more and more comfortable. That's really a great way to start a really great friendship. Also, if they're an international staff, like they become a really good friend, you might travel to, say, Canada, and you can visit them and stay on their couch because you've made a really good friendship with them. So that's really important too. Now let's kind of move into a category we haven't talked too much about, but have been walking around for a while, and that's staff to camper in this obviously non-romantic relationship. So how do you walk that line of being their friend, but also their counselor? A lot of the times we talk about boundaries with campers. So how do we make sure that we're keeping those boundaries up as a counselor and still being a mentor and role model for them? So let's shoot off with Phoebe. I see your first notes are establish boundaries. So we're already hitting it.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that you're speaking my language over here. So I think establishing boundaries is one of the most important things that you need to do, especially because as a counselor, you can be so close in age to campers. Like the age difference is really not that big. And so you need to be clear about the boundaries that you're establishing and the information that you're willing to share with campers as you're developing those relationships. You want to create authentic connections over shared interests and hobbies. You want to talk about things that you have in common. You want to pump up camp. If your shared interest and hobby is camp, then even better, because then you get to enjoy it together. And the most important thing that I want to hit on, though, Oliver, you were talking about walking that line, and it's so important, is walking the line between being fun and also being really safe. I know one thing that I struggled with growing up as a staff member is that I'm never like the most fun staff member. Oliver, you're way more fun than me, and I love that about you. And there are people who are just like inherently like really, really fun, and they show that in great ways. And some people are so fun that they are, the coolest kid at camp. But those are not always the people that kids go to in the middle of the night when they need help. So be sure that you are also being the safe person. Make sure that when you're establishing boundaries and you're interacting with campers, they know that your safety is at the heart of everything that you are doing, that their safety is at the heart of everything that you're doing. Because when they need support, which eventually some of them are going to need, they're going to go to the counselors who make them feel the safest, even if those campers are not, or those counselors are not the ones that are, covered in body paint and running around wildly in the woods. Those people are great, but you need to find a way to be both.
I like you. One of the first things you touched upon was that age difference is so close. And I want to hear on how that is when you're developing that relationship with the camper. Because you are so close in age, you are not a teacher or a parent who is an adult. You're not coming down on them super hard on things. You're really not there yet, and they can see that. That's super important. But on the other side, you're not a peer of theirs where you're learning alongside them. You're at a point 3, 5, 6 years ahead of them, and you're in a spot where you're cool just by being the age you are. You've learned enough, but also you're still kind of making mistakes. That's kind of really important when you're connecting with campers, and it's something they don't get anywhere else. So if they are, in school, the older kids stay in the older place in school. And the closest thing they can probably get to is a babysitter, but their teachers, their coaches, their parents are all older than them. Finding that age gap is really rare, and camp offers that. And it can't be really replicated in a lot of other places. Matt, can you hit us up with your points?
For sure. I think what both of you said really well is that you're a role model, like inherently. You don't get the choice to like be or be not a role model. If you're their counselor, they're 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, they're going to just be looking up to you. So be wise about the explicit and the implicit lessons that you're teaching through your actions. And I think that goes along with keeping them safe and being aware of where that line is. Just the practical advice that I would have is, as much as we say like you shouldn't have favorites, you're gonna have favorites in your cabin. You are like Sally is gonna be like the most well-behaved kid and super fun loving and have conversations with you, and you're gonna love them. Whereas Jenny might just be like pushing all your buttons in the wrong way. But you have to obviously don't show that you have those favorites, and that's because it's okay that you have those, but giving equal attention to all of your campers is really important here, because it sets you up to not worry about that like weird one-to-one relationships and like campers aren't going to get like jealous of that factor, like think that you're giving them more attention. I think give individual attention equally, if that makes sense. So if you're going to do secret handshakes, everyone gets a secret handshake. Have you seen that? There's that video of that teacher who has a secret handshake with all 32 of their kids, or like that. And there's that one that's super long, but like that's awesome, because they're giving them all that special attention, no matter if that person really grinded their gears the day before. That they have that common ground. So be aware of not showing the campers that are your favorites, and give that equal individual attention.
Yeah, and that equal individual attention is really important, because if you're not doing that and you're really focused on a camper, it kind of gets into my point, which is child sexual abuse training that you probably have to do no matter what camp you work at. And if you're not doing this, if you're listening to this podcast and you're about to go into summer camp and no one's giving you child abuse training, go to your director immediately and say, hi, this needs to happen. It's super important that any childcare facility is getting a very adequate or very strong child sexual abuse prevention training. Super important. With that being said, but going back to that equal and individual attention Matt was talking about, you need to make sure that you're giving it to everyone. If not, then it's actually something called grooming, where you're specifically looking at a camper, which is something you would probably learn in your child abuse prevention training. With that being said, focus on that training that you go through. It's going to teach you the things that you need to see in order to make sure that the environment you're working in is a safe one for children. I can't emphasize enough that camp is full of kids, and people who have bad intentions might try to take advantage of that. You as a counselor can be there to make sure that your campers are safe, because you notice those things because you paid attention to that training. It might not be the most exciting one to listen to out of all the trainings you do. It's probably not going to be like a pudding drop, which sounds really fun, it's going to be probably really seriously done. And that's because it's a very serious issue. Pay attention during that training so that you can keep a non-romantic relationship, but also you can protect kids and make sure that everyone around you is maintaining that. With that being said, don't think that every little thing that a counselor does is going to be like a red flag. If it is a red flag, report it, do what you're supposed to do, but it doesn't mean that that counselor is a child abuser. It just might mean that they forgot about the rules, or they were really focused on that camper at that time and wanted to do something special for them. There's a line. We need to pay attention to it. We need to keep an eye, but pay attention during that child sexual abuse prevention training. I can't emphasize how important that is. So you waited a while. It's the exciting time that we're going to share a brief little bit about our camp relationship stories and what they have been like for us. So without further ado, Phoebe, do you want to tell us a little about you and your campship?
Yeah, do I ever. So in December of 2014, I started dating a guy, and I said very quickly, I'm moving across the country to work at a summer camp. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. And so he moved with me. We worked for 2 years out at Camp Elphinstone, where we met Oliver, actually, in our second summer. So we've worked now at kind of 1.5 camps together. There was a time when Mike, who was my partner, was a counselor and I was a senior staff member. That was when we had first moved out. And then he was on senior staff the next year. And that was really like an awesome opportunity, frankly, because it's really cool to get to share camp with someone that you love. And it's also really cool when that experience enhances your relationship rather than tears it apart, which certainly I've seen happen to people. I've been really fortunate to attend already one camp wedding of people that worked at camp together and that I love this year. And I've got another one coming up in the fall, and it's truly been really awesome. So Mike's a sweet guy. He was great to work at camp with. He makes a pretty cool roommate now. And and Oliver can attest, that he's a bit of a weirdo, and camp was one of the best things, for us to do together.
Yeah, I can publicly just say that Mike is the best. There is almost no better match in the world, and anyone who could be interested in him being their partner is sort of luck because he's with Phoebe, but you'd be a certain catch.
Oh, don't tell him that. It'll go right to his head. Yeah,
I know. I wish I could tell him every day. But you guys live in Canada. It's so far away. But Matt, what about you? What's your camp relationship story?
I don't even know if it's as strong as your and Mike's bro relationship you got going on right there. I feel the love like all the way in this corner of Canada, and I just it's sweet to see Oliver. That's great. No, I'm sorry, Oliver. I think one of the coolest things about camp relationships, and I think Phoebe touched on it, is that I have this belief that camp people are the best people. And I am fortunate in my life that my closest friends are all my camp friends. So from a non-romantic relationship, my best couple friend are a camp couple, and they got married, and I got to go to their wedding. And then my other closest friends are a camp couple, and we got to go to their wedding. And I'm fortunate that I met my partner at summer camp, and then we're going to get married at camp in this coming September, which is just such a blessing. And I think it really speaks to the fact that when you work with someone, you get to see all parts of them, the best parts of them, the most tired parts of them. And I think it's like the ultimate couples counseling is to work at summer camp together, because you like in sickness, in health, and all those things that whatever that typical wedding speech is, you see that with people. And I am so fortunate for the relationship that I'm in, because my partner, Laura, is the bomb digs. And we worked together as LIT directors, and that was like a month-long LIT program. And we weren't dating in our first year. And by the end of that first year, I was like, wait a minute, I really like working with this person, and I really like overcoming all these challenges with this person. isn't that what kind of being in a relationship? Hey, wait a minute. And then between the 2 seasons, we decided to date. And then we were dating in our 2nd year and went through all the things that we talked about, right? Keeping it professional and balancing that side of your relationship with not letting it interfere with your job. And when you're working with like directly with 9 16-year-olds and like 10 16-year-olds, they're very interested and just assumed we were dating already, so we had to really be careful in that. And then eventually it's, you know, we have some of our LITs that were in that group are going to be attending our wedding because we've just been friends with them for that long. And so I yeah, camp people are the best people, and if you can find yourself a camp person, it also helps if they understand camp too, because when May comes and you kind of disappear, they are very understanding.
Yeah, no kidding. Can I jump on that, Matt, and just say that one of the greatest things about working with someone that you're in a relationship with at camp is that it really gives you the opportunity to see how that person addresses conflict. And I think that that's a really awesome thing when, you know, when I was supervising at camp and Mike was working as a counselor, you know, he had to come to me with something that he thought that I had done wrong. And so he was, you know, and that showed me great strength in terms of conflict resolution styles and all of that stuff. And if you can work together at camp and work through conflict in a professional manner, I think that that says also great things about what you're going to be able to do in your personal relationship outside of camp.
Yeah, for sure. I think you guys have really lovely relationships with camp people. My significant other, she is also a camp person who's currently not working in camp, but she had that experience. We actually met at a camp conference and, you know, we started talking from there. So we had different camp experiences coming into it. But then we worked at the same facility for a full year almost together. And that kind of got our relationship blossoming. But when you live at the same spot, you're pretty much living together already. So a lot of the times it's a fast forwarded relationship for sure. That camp kind of gives you because you're with them or working on the same goal 24/7, where a lot of other responsibilities you go back to. Kind of go back to the relationships that happen during summer camp. I think it's really important for us, even though our camp stories, all 3 of us have wonderful camp relationships. I like to talk about maybe a failed one. I had a summer camp relationship. I started a relationship with a girl at a summer camp. We were together. We enjoyed being together. We had a lot of good memories and great time. And I really appreciate and go back to it in my mind and think, wow, that was a great time in my life. She inspired me to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have done without her being a part of my life. Unfortunately, that relationship has ended, and we've both gone our separate ways. And a lot of summer camp relationships do go that way. You come into summer, you, like we said at the very beginning, you're tan, you typically get pretty fit during the summer. You guys are there working on the same goal, and it's really easy to kind of fall in love with somebody for that summer. You get that summer love that is so famous with camps. And then you get into the fall and winter and you go your separate ways and things kind of fall apart. I want to emphasize how I kind of started the story off is find that person who's special during the summer. Don't hold back. Don't say it's, you know, it's only going to last the summer, because I can attest to the fact that the relationship that you get from them, the experience you have is worth it. And you kind of find out, you find out along the way. With that being said, still go back to everything we were saying before about making sure you have a responsible camp relationship. That's the camp director.
That undermine the entire episode.
But yeah, take that relationship and make it what it is. I'm happy. I'm in a relationship now with a girl, and I couldn't be happier with her and our relationship. But you need to know sometimes it doesn't always have a storybook ending with somebody, but you can still have an amazing story in it. So with that being said, those are our camp relationships. We're going to end, we're going to go into our highlights right now. Matt, can you hit us up with some of the great things we had during this show?
Yes, I was so intrigued with what you guys were saying this episode. These might not be so great, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we talked about we kind of chunked this into relationships and then non-relationships. First thing, follow your policies. Don't listen to us if your policies say otherwise. Listen to your policies. Staff to staff relationships. Focus on your job and make sure privacy is key there. And also be a role model of what a positive working relationship looks like at camp, and be the role model of focusing on your job. When it comes to campers asking questions about your relationship, be honest. Not giving any details is really important, and focusing on the qualities. And then also talking about the great friendship aspect of those two people. With camper to camper relationships, help them focus on friendships. Don't shame them for being in a relationship, but just be aware of them. Be aware of where they're going and what's going on, and making sure you're not supervising them to create those conditions for that relationship to flourish in any inappropriate way. If campers do take it too far, get help. Get some support from a director who can help navigate the situation carefully, and just make sure that you're not that they're not confiding in you inappropriately there. With campers who identify as LGBTQ+, don't freak out. If their relationships happen, it's not that much different from any other relationship. But remember, these things are important, that this could be their safe space, and we need to be aware that it could or couldn't be their safe space depending on the culture that we create at camp. So when you're focusing on your rules, role model how you would expect all genders to see, all genders to be. So holding hands, hugging, think about what precedence that sets for all genders, not just your what you would expect from a quote-unquote straight relationship. Don't focus on the genders because it's not that important overall. With offsite drama, I wrote down save your drama for your mama. We didn't talk about that, but that's all I got from that section. Sorry, guys. Non-romantic staff-to-staff relationships to help staff become friends with each other. Think about helping people, and especially focusing on returning staff members or those who might need some extra support and serving them. We talked about love languages, and there'll be a quiz in the show notes that you can take to cover more on that. And then also consent, that it's a great time to be talking about consent, and building that within friendships and romantic relationships. With staff and camper relationships, making sure you set those boundaries, stay safe, keep yourself safe from any sort of abuse allegations, just by establishing that boundary, giving equal and individual attention to everybody, and overall being conscious of how you're setting the precedence of not showing favorites with people. Then we talked about our camp relationships, and just not every camp relationship ends happily, so be aware of that and don't let it take your focus away. But you can meet the significant other, the person who's going to change your life at camp, if you're open to that and if you're professional about that.
Perfect. Yeah, I love listening to the highlights. It makes us fill our egos with how many brilliant things we've talked.
Yeah, it also sounds way more coherent than I feel like we actually were. So kudos to you, Matt. Well done.
Thank you.
All right, it's time for our get ready section. So this is how we get ready for this. Or what can you start doing now? So we're gonna hit it off with Phoebe. What's our get ready coming from you?
Yes. So from me to you, the counselor. Go out and buy a shoe organizer that hangs on the back of your cabin door or off of a bunk. I'm so serious about this. I didn't learn it until well into my camping career, and it is a life-changing piece of equipment. Use it to organize campers' toothbrushes, sunscreens, bug spray, etc. Label every shoe holder with a name, and I promise that it will save you years in conversations about why Ellen doesn't have her toothbrush again. I really do swear by this trick, and I would encourage anyone who is working with children in camping to get themselves a back of door shoe organizer stat.
All right. Yeah, mine's going to be pretty close to that. But before we get there, Matt, let me know what's going on with you. What's your advice to a counselor right now?
Yeah, so we're recording this in April. It's early April, and we're all kind of in that mood of starting to think about camp. So to give you as a counselor some perspective on your directors are just starting to pull their hair out because camp is getting really close. So one thing that you can do to help your directors is to get your paperwork in, or do that pre-work that your director has asked. We all know you're busy and life is crazy, but at the end of the day, it's not that hard to fill out a health form, and it's not that hard to get get your police check. Just doing those little things will really help with what's going on in the camp office right now, because we're all running around getting camp ready and doing all those things. And the last thing that we want to do is be a pain in your butt and be like, hey, get your paperwork in, get your paperwork in. Take one thing off of our plates and get your paperwork in, please.
Yeah. I like the saying I once heard, don't wait till June or you'll be doomed. My piece of advice is really similar to Phoebe. So once you're out going and buying that shoe organizer, go right next door and buy a laundry basket that can be compressed and folded, not like a bag one or like a hard one that you could stuff inside like a backpack. Because when you're camp and you get to, say, the waterfront, or you get to your team building activity or your high ropes, you reach inside your backpack, you pull your laundry basket out, it extends into a big old giant thing to stuff things in, and then you tell all your campers, put your stuff inside or lean it against, and that's your little zone for all your camper belongings. And that way, when you guys get up and get ready to leave, you wait till everyone has emptied your basket, and then you can press it down, put it back in your backpack, and you guys can be on your way, and nothing goes missing when you're out and about on camp. And we have a general meeting area for our cabin too to come back to if we ever need it. We just say, get back to the basket, and everyone can head on over there to grab their stuff. With that being said, that is our show for today. If you could go to camphacker.tv/love. That link will get a tweet ready for you that talks about the show.
That's right. And reviews for us are really important. So we would love it if you headed to camphacker.tv/iTunes or wherever you get this podcast and head to the ratings and review button and leave us an honest review. We really take those seriously, and we appreciate the feedback that we get. And before we go, I wanted to quickly go around. If people want to get in touch or ask questions, we've had some really great questions actually that have been emailed to us over the last little bit. So I wanted to give some space for that. So if you want to get in touch with me, if you have a question, if you have a comment about the show, if you want to see a picture of that 600-pound pig that Oliver was talking about, we can hook you up with that. But if you have any questions for me, Matt at gocamp.pro. That's MATT at gocamp.pro. Oliver?
Yeah, you can reach me at oliver.green@gymca.org. So it's just my name with a period in it with my Y. And then you can also just reach out to me. Facebook, my name is my Facebook, and I'm pretty open to anybody, or just reach out to me on Messenger and ask some questions. And I've had a couple of cool conversations with other camp pros that way. So if you want to reach out, just hit me on the wonders of Facebook. And Phoebe, how can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, if you need to get a hold of me, send me an email at phoebekjones@gmail.com. That's PHOEBEKJONES@gmail.com. Or get in touch with Oliver, and he'll get you in touch with me.
So that's our show. You know how to get a hold of us. If you got questions, if you got reviews that you want to give us, please head on over to them. And don't forget that if you want to find some of our show notes, you can head over to CampHacker/podcast. And with that being said, everyone, camp is camp, and camp is all good.